Welcome to the Weekly Wrangle. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Tyler Bay, and the Weekly Wrangle is all about bringing up Houdini artworks that you have made in the community, appreciating them, figuring out what works great, and trying to offer constructive critique so that we can all learn from what others are doing. This is all live, by the way, so feel free to add in the chat, comment wherever you're watching in. I'll kind of keep a side eye here at the chat as we go along. And yeah, feel free to hang out for a bit as we check out some cool Houdini artwork and have fun with that. A few things before we get started, though. First of all, I want to show you what I've been up to. This, my friends, is Pinky the pig. And he is going to be the star of the next CG Forge course, which is all about hair and fur. This isn't the final result. This is just some R&D tests I've been doing for the past month, or at least one of the tests I've been doing. But you'll be happy to know that hopefully by the end of February, I will have a hair and fur course put together. Fingers crossed, that's the goal. We'll see if we can make that happen. So the other thing that you'll be happy to know is that I'm really thinking about putting a beard on him, because for this next month, I'm not going to trim my beard for reference. So really by the next time you guys see me on the next Wrangle, I might have a beard down to here, and so might Pinky. Kind of on the fence, but I think it might be a good idea. It just kind of seems like a nice bearded face that Pinky has right there. So anyway, that's all good news. And I just wanted to give you guys a sneak peek at what I've been up to lately. The other thing as well is that I've also been doing a lot of updates to the Node Bible. So if you guys have ever checked out the Node Bible before, it's basically a bunch of encyclopedia entries on various nodes in Houdini. And so what I do is I take what the documents have, or the user documents have, and I go further. So I have a quick tip here. I explain things in a way that might be easier to understand. So I kind of have my own way of explaining what these various parameters do. And I offer custom diagrams. I also started adding in some GIFs because I know a lot of you guys like watching GIFs or reading GIFs as you're learning Houdini. So there's been a lot of improvements on this as well. Honestly, a lot of my time has been spent this month just trying to update the Node Bible because, as you can imagine, writing all of this, creating quick tips, creating diagrams, it takes a very long time. So if you haven't heard from me for a while, that's pretty much what I've been doing. I've been sticking my nose into the user docs and trying to really piece together all the stuff. So you'll be happy to know that there's a lot more progress on that. I believe we're up to about 98 entries at this point. And my goal by the end of 2023 is to get that up to about 150. So we'll see if that can happen. But yeah, I'm really excited about it. And I think that you guys will certainly enjoy all the new updates I've been putting in there as well. So in addition to that, I also now offer certifications, if you haven't heard. And specifically with certifications, it comes in 3 flavors. For the beginner certification, there's a Houdini Fundamentals. Intermediate is Houdini Specialist. And the advanced certification is the Houdini Mastery certification. And so depending on where your skill level is at, you may be able to get one certification over another. And I haven't put this on the website yet, but you can also look forward to getting a free license of Houdini if you successfully complete either the Specialist certification or the Houdini Mastery. A free commercial license that's good for, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think about 60 days after you get the certification. It's part of Side Effects' greater initiative to provide a free commercial license for people that go through training programs and universities and things like that. So I'm really happy that either now or in the future, I will be able to hopefully offer you guys that as well. So that is all really cool. And in the very least, if you guys are ever lost or trying to figure out what to do next, these certifications also work as a great outline as to what you ought to study next if you're trying to get used to Houdini. So there's that. I've also been busy with what else? Mentorships, individual consultations. Right now, with mentorships, I am not currently accepting any more for the time being. But if you guys want to be on the wait list for that, I'd be happy to add you on when that opens up again. And you guys can always just schedule one-off consultations for 45 or 90 minutes if you ever want individual help from me on whatever you have going on. So that about does it for announcements and all of that fun stuff. At least I think so. Let me take a look at my notes real quick here. Oh, actually, one more big announcement before we get going here. The Weekly Wrangle. I am going to push this back 1 hour. So 1 hour into the future. So that will be 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, which is 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, or 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's going to be from now on when I do these live events. It happens once a month, and you guys are free to tune in whenever you'd like. All right. Well, let's get into some fun art and some stuff I found recently on Twitter when I type in hashtag Houdini. So this first one here is by Mondas. So Mondas Jim. And this was a project, I believe an environment project, that was taking a look at some cool lighting, some set dressing, maybe some procedural modeling. There's also a YouTube video that we can watch. So let's take a look at that. So cool close-up of an ant going on. Some grass, this really epic bridge. Very cool. Kind of some magic going on. RBD. And it looks like it might be part of a music video of some kind. So yeah, from there it goes into a music video or something like that. So yeah, really cool stuff. Let's talk about some stuff that's working really well. For one, I do think it's a really cool idea. I think it's cool to have a close-up of an ant or something small, then bring that into a bigger environment, especially when you have a big old wide lens. That gives a huge sense of space, and it just makes everything feel interesting. The other thing that's cool is about this concept is just the whole magic. The fact that there's something for you to discover as this thing progresses onwards. When we have these floating sticks, that's not something we're used to seeing. And when it pans over to something you're not used to seeing, that's going to draw people in and make them curious on what it is. So as you're looking at your own projects, that's something that's really cool to do. Is there an opportunity for you to pan a camera or to have something going on that we're not used to seeing that makes you curious about that environment, about that world? Because that's the kind of stuff that sucks you into what's happening. So that's really cool. We also have these statues. We have some particle effects going on. And then we have it kind of some kind of ice rocket that shoots out. And or glass rocket. I can't really tell what that is. So that is what's going well, or that's at least a few of the things that are going really well here. Things that could potentially use some improvement. One of the first things I noticed was just how much volumetrics are present in this scene. You know, I do like the fact that you can kind of tell what's there, but not really, because that draws you in when you can kind of tell what it is. But I think there's too much volumetrics, and I think it's just kind of covering the whole scene a little bit too much. It looks like we do have a bit of breakup in the fog, which is good. I always recommend, if you're going to do volumetrics, to break it up so that you put some noise in the volume values and have little pockets that are not even, right? Feels less CG when you have that. But even at that, I just think that the values are too hot at the moment. I think, if anything, God rays and fog are a very useful tool for layering elements as they go back into the scene. They're very good for creating a sense of space, and I typically advise using them lightly rather than just blasting it out like this. This is almost like a full-blown fog rather than a volumetric kind of situation. And I think that not only does that create a lot of crazy render times, but I just think that it's probably could be better used to layer elements rather than cover them up, which is what's happening here. So that would, I'd say, be one of my first constructive critiques of this. The other thing as well is we have some interesting magic, but there is some stepping happening here. We could see we have some like kind of chunky, what would you say, some like stepping going on right there as the particles go forward, almost like you can see where the substeps happened. So right there, there. And that could be, I think, smoothened out a bit. The other thing as well is that it looks like we just go straight into that particle effect. And I think it often works better to have at least a little something to lead up to that particle magic happening. So either it's some particles that are attracted to the source of magic, or it's something on the ground shooting out first, but to have some kind of leading effect before the main effect happens is always a very powerful way to emphasize the impact of magic in this case. So I do think that that could also be something that would help improve this a little bit. And then when it comes to this glass or this ice statue, we can't really tell what this is very easily. And so I would just say if you are going to have something that is taking the attention like this, you want to make sure that that thing can be easily identified rather than obscured too much before it just lifts off into outer space or whatever it's doing here. So there you have it. That is some awesome things that are happening, some things that I think could be helpful in improving it. And all in all, this is a really cool project. So great job, Mondas. All right, next up, we have FnaticDummy. And this is called Drink More Water. Let's actually start here from the beginning and play this through. All right, so one of the first things you guys will notice about this project that I really like is the fact that it has a theme. And that's what's something that's very interesting because it has a theme. And then at the very end, we have a contrast against that theme, which is like dry, no water, skull in the desert, like this. And we really emphasize that at the very end. So there's a lot of cool things that are happening here with how this is directed. For one, you'll notice that not only do we have a theme going on with water, but we also have a changing environment and it's happening quickly. So we go from pouring a glass of water to a teardrop to a leaf going into a pond to a faucet. And so what that does is it kind of, again, brings you into what's happening here because you don't really know what's happening. I think maybe that's one of the themes you'll see for today. If you don't know exactly what's happening as a viewer, that makes you curious sometimes. And in this case, if we're jumping from one environment to the next really quickly, that's interesting because we're trying to find connections between those different scenes. And that's kind of how this theme of water is established, right? We see that water is happening on each one of these environments and we kind of piece that together in our heads. Oh yeah, this is about dropping water. And then once we've established the fact that we have an environment and that it's connected by water, we then contrast it with a new environment and we stay at this shot for a much longer time to emphasize it. So these are all the things you want to think about when you're trying to make these cuts and you're trying to make these projects that have themes or motifs that you're trying to emphasize. It's not only the timing of the edits, but it's also figuring out what is mysterious about it so that the viewer gets drawn in and how to give them something to hang on to so that it creates meaning across the various shots. So that's what's really cool about this. It's really well done in that way. Okay, so as far as constructive critique goes, what can improve this? Let's see here. So I guess one of the first things I didn't pick up right away was when we had a teardrop that was falling and hitting some kind of paper right there. I was able to really pick up the glass of water easily. And we had 3 shots dedicated to that. But I would probably have liked to seen one more shot here with the teardrop so that we have a total of 3 shots that identifies the teardrop to the paper. So maybe it goes down from the eye. Maybe we can see a bit more of that eye so we can actually identify this as a teardrop. And then maybe the next shot can be it falling off of like a chin or falling off the air or something like that, hitting the paper, and then that would be your 3 shots. But I would like to see 3 shots for the glass, 3 shots for the tear hitting the page. And then I think we actually only need 2 shots for the plant because it's more obvious. So that is more apparent. And then we have 1 shot here, or 2 shots here for the faucet. So I think the faucet's cool, but I also think that could have been something else that might have been more interesting. Maybe because it's very similar to the pouring of the water here at the beginning. So I'm trying to think what else you could do besides a faucet. Even though this is really well done, I love the shading here, love everything that's happening like CG and look dev wise. There might be a different kind of droplet that you can find that's different than all the others to just make this one stand out as its own thing. Because in my mind, this is kind of similar in both vibe, color, theme as the drops in the water glass. So if you could find something else for that third or for that last drop, that would be awesome. And then the last thing here with the skull, I think that this is really awesome. And I love the camera shake, by the way. It's very organic. It really helps when you have that zoom out. What would make this even cooler is if we had a bit more parallax going. So if we had a parallax zoom out, that's where you change the focal length and you move back at the same time. So think about changing your zoom as you move back. The subject will stay where it is in the frame, but we just see a difference in the camera distortion. And so that's kind of that parallax effect. That'd be really cool right here if it's not already happening. And also, I do think it would be interesting to take this long-lasting shot and maybe have the focus gradually kind of focus in to the skull, or maybe the focus slowly cover the skull, starting at the teeth and then moving back towards the eyes. Kind of nitpicky stuff, but I think that would also add a little something to this shot right here. But all in all, very cool project, very well done, and a lot of awesome editing techniques from this as well to take for your own projects. All right, moving on to something a bit more technical and simulation-esque. This is by AsianSilks, and this is looking at some bubble effects. So first of all, I do love the pastel colors. For whatever reason, this seems to be a theme, I think, with a lot of Stephen Nipping stuff and with some of the other simulations that I see, that some of the test simulations, where we have the pastel colors really bright in your face, and then we see, the simulation occur. Totally a cool style. I dig it. So first of all, what do I like about this? Well, I like how fast it is, for one. I like the fact that this is not a slow-mo bubble situation, that this is happening at more of a realistic speed. Because when you look out there in the real world and you see bubbles happen, or you see all these different effects happen, they're usually pretty quick, right? If you dropped a orange into a bathtub or whatever this is, right? Those bubbles would happen quickly, and it may even happen quicker than what we're seeing right here. But that fast action makes it interesting. It makes it feel more detailed, even though it's not, but it feels more detailed because of the fact that you can't quickly latch on to everything that's happening. That's a nice little simulation trick, by the way, when you have things moving faster. And the other thing as well is that I think it's just a cool idea, right? So that's what I like about this. It's a really well executed simulation. Um, and I do love the fact that we have some of this air bubble that's happening around the objects as well. Some of the bubbles that are left over once it's gone through, kind of collecting at the top. It's all very nice. As far as constructive critique goes, what can we say? What can improve this, guys? I think one thing that can improve this is the fact that we have these bubbles gathering towards the top. I think it's cool, but it also doesn't make it feel like water anymore. Because if you had water and that was the top of the water, those bubbles would pop and they wouldn't just kind of hang out up there like that. So that to me breaks this illusion a little bit. I honestly, if you just cropped this whole thing or you just took the bubbles out of frame, I think it would be much stronger because this just feels unnatural for what water would do. This would be more of like a, I don't know, like a thick viscous situation where the bubbles would just kind of hang out at the top like that. And so I think that's what's making this feel a little bit strange. But the bubbles here in the middle are brilliant in their movements and just the fact that they feel organic, they're randomized, they don't all just go up at the same speed. They all are kind of whimsical in how fast the bubbles go up. So that's all fantastic. But that's really my main critique here is having that little top thing. The other thing as well is that if we try to pause this right around these objects dropping, one thing that is a little bit off-putting is the fact that we have this bright pastel backdrop, right? But these objects are really dark and they're really gray looking. And so even though we have an apple and we have a can and we have these other objects, they feel very disconnected and in contrast with the bright pastel colors. So it almost just feels like these are rotten fruits or something that's less appealing or something like that. And I don't know if that was intentional, but it definitely comes off that way just because we have such a bright pastel backdrop. And so what I'd recommend doing is brightening up these objects. They're too dark, they're too desaturated, and bring them out with a bit of better lighting. So just take an area light, maybe at the top left, kind of going down diagonally, brighten them up, make sure that those colors are at the same saturation or a similar saturation as the backdrop, and they should feel like they belong more so in the same scene together. So that's one constructive critique I would have. The other thing as well is that I think we have a little bit too much refraction here. We could see how much this light is bending, and it's bending quite a lot, a little bit too much as a matter of fact. And so I think maybe the IOR might be a little bit strange on these bubbles. One thing I talk about in my fluids course is the fact that when you have bubbles, you need to account for an IOR of 1 because that's pockets of air that you're seeing. And so a lot of times people struggle with bubbles because, you're trying to turn up the IOR for distortion when in reality, you should bring it back down to 1 where air exists when making that light bend. So that's one thing to pay attention to right here. I think maybe the IOR was just cranked up, but it does look a little bit wacky and weird when that happens. But anyway, that's just some constructive feedback there. And overall, like I said, a really great simulation. The animation is very strong. And overall, I'm a big fan of how it turned out. So great job there, Asian. All right, so how are we doing on time here, you guys? We may not be able to get through all of this, but that's okay. We have Mito Pertin, so thank you for joining, Mito, and thanks for checking out the tutorial. We also have Strider, so thanks for joining, guys. Really appreciate it. All right, so let's move on to maybe, I don't know, a couple more, 2 or 3 more. That sound good? And we can go from there. Okay, so that was Asian. Really cool stuff. Also, I wanted to show you guys something interesting, just as a side note. I was going through these different Twitter hashtags, and this popped up right here. This is done by Mozen Tabasi, and this is using stable diffusion in Houdini. So it's taking a 3D scene. I'll go ahead and maximize it here, of this boat as an example, and you feed the stable diffusion, which is the AI art generator, this 3D scene with these keywords, and it starts spitting out different versions of the scene, which is super cool. I think this is a really cool thing, and it looks like you can also get this HDA that he's been working on potentially for free on Gumroad. Let's see if we can find it here. Yeah, or actually on the GitHub right here. So this is his GitHub, and yeah. So again, at Tabasi Mosen, if you guys are interested in checking that out. I just thought this was really cool, using PDG, some keywords, and something in your scene to generate different AI examples. I know AI is a very controversial topic for some people these days, but I personally think it's very cool, especially if you're trying to use this in conjunction with just creating general ideas, right? If you're just trying to see what something could be, or you're just trying to artistically brainstorm, that is, I think, where this really shines. And anyway, I just happened to stumble across this and thought you guys might find it interesting. All right, so moving on now. We also have this house generator by Santeri Okasen. And the reason why I brought this up is I really have no idea how this was built, or, this. I guess I could comment on this, that, or the other as far as the model itself, but I just wanted to show you something. So look at all these nodes. This is an absolute crazy, cityscape of nodes. And one thing that I think becomes intimidating for people that are first starting Houdini is just like screenshots like this, where you have a city of nodes. And it's kind of that, I think what started this whole trend is actually Substance Designer, when people would show their Substance Designer thing and then they would show the network, and people would be like, oh my gosh, that person's so smart or amazing, right? But looking at this, I just want you to notice that a lot of these nodes are just probably just straight up SOP nodes that are used multiple times over and over again. And so, I do think that this probably could be organized better potentially with some, backdrops and labeling and stuff. I mean, who knows? Like if you gave me the scene file and said, hey, Tyler, I need you to figure out what happened, I would have no idea. But I just wanted to point out the fact that you don't have to go crazy and learning Vex and learning for loops and learning Python if you want to procedurally model. If you just know the tools at hand, if you know the SOP nodes, you can go a very, very far distance in just using some basic nodes in procedural modeling to get interesting results like this. Now, yes, there are some for loops in here as well, but even the for loops aren't too crazy. They're just here and there using a few nodes. And anyway, I just wanted to point out the fact that even though this looks intimidating, and if you see node networks like this that are intimidating, it's really not as bad as you think. And maybe you guys can agree, disagree with that. I don't know, but I just wanted to point that out because as I was going through this, I just found that interesting. All right, so back to some artwork here. This is from Ashan Parisi, Messing with Particle Separate Node, Houdini, Generative Art, Nature Organic. Let's check this out. So particle separate. We have lots of particles here. And this is very, very interesting. This feels very, well, organic. It feels almost like I'm looking at some cells in a petri dish or something like that. So first of all, my first impression is, wow, this is looking really cool. And secondly, it just shows how you can take one node and just use that to drive like this incredible effect. I think sometimes when we have Houdini nodes, we just take it at face value, but we fail to get creative in how we use them. And this is a great example of creatively using a node and really just using it to make all of this interesting stuff happen. Taking one idea of a node and then just seeing how far you can push that and not stopping until you have all these interesting things happening right here. So yeah, my first impression is, wow, that's amazing. But also the fact that this person took one node and pushed it so far as to create this entire effect. It's very, very cool. And also a very great idea for your own projects. If you want to take something or you want to be unique in your demo reel, in your projects, what you could do is just take one node and see how far you can take it. Just take a project and just keep going. What can I do with the particle, the pop force node? Or this is using, what is it? The pop particle separate, right? How can you just take that and just take it as far as you can? It's a really good creative exercise, and I really think that this turned out great. I don't really have any constructive critique on this because, I think this is more of a technical experiment rather than more of an artistic one. I guess, in true habit and fashion, I would say maybe change the color of the backdrop so it's not just a plain black, but I always say that. So that's just kind of a generic thing, I guess. But yeah, really cool technical exercise and something to take as inspiration for your own projects as you're going along in Houdini. All right, this here is done by Kyle Jameson. And this also kind of has that microbiology, feel to it, that microbiology vibe. So here are some cool works. That's more of a technology looking thing, like a greeble sort of thing. But here's a good example of some pastel colors. Again, that style, that pastel style that I think works really well with abstract art and simulations. This, I think, is looking pretty good. It is a bit grainy in the render, so I guess that's one thing I would say right away. It needs some more samples, unless that's intentional. And if it is intentional, I'd say turn it down a bit because it's a little bit too much. But I really do like the shapes here, and I'm not really sure exactly like how this was generated. Maybe this was some motion blur. One fun experiment you guys can try out if you haven't before is to try painting with motion blur. So you take some particles, you can make something similar to this by taking some particles, having them go quickly in circles, right? So just flying in circles, take that motion blur and then treat that motion blur as a brush stroke of paint or something like that. And you can really get some interesting things when you start using motion blur to define shapes when it comes to abstract art. So that's really cool. I also love the fact that we have different colors. So it's not just one, color of something. We have this red in the middle, this green. We have these little shapes here breaking things up. So that kind of detail also goes a very long way when you're painting with motion blur and you're doing this kind of abstract stuff. Again, I don't know if this was using motion blur, but this reminds me of doing that, and it's definitely a cool technique. Okay, we have that, again, kind of pastel colors. We have this sort of hair looking thing. It just looks like a lot of fun, And, well, when it comes to these experiments, it's also fun to just keep things light, just take maybe a day or two to do something like this, move on to the next thing. Having quick projects is inspiring. It's fun. It kind of helps your momentum. It helps you go forward quickly in learning. So that's one thing I really like about this. And you could do something totally similar in your own style, and it'd be very cool. So great job, Kyle. I think that these ideas and experiments are heading in a really cool direction, and it stood out in a great way. Okay, so this is from Money Vale here. Struggling to learn and integrate Houdini to tell stories within a generalist approach. Yeah, definitely. Well, I think one of the hard things about that Money Val is the fact that it's not easy to come up with a render and come up with an idea quickly in Houdini. If we're just talking about ideas and we're just talking about brainstorming, I would say CGI really isn't the best medium for that. And usually at studios, that's where you use concept art, or that's where you use the AI generated images. I know many people are upset about that right now, but let's be honest, it's great for ideas because of the fact that it's just quick and it's fast. So I see CGI as a way of refining an idea and kind of getting to that more final product versus using it as a medium for generating the idea in the first place. If we're talking about stories, if we're talking about, things that are not abstract, right? Some of the stuff here we were just looking at with Kyle can be abstract and really cool, and a really great way of generating ideas because you're using technology to create something that is unknown. But that's a really niche situation. And if you're trying to storytell, it's way better to focus on concept art than it is to use Houdini for that specific task. So I mean, it sounds like you're already using AI concepting. That's really cool. I would just say to it's difficult to bridge the gap between what your AI concept or what your head wants and what you get from Houdini. It's very difficult to make CG in general, but I would say that I guess as a general piece of advice, I would just say that you want to keep your momentum going and you don't want to get too stuck for too long if you're trying to just quickly get out ideas and keep the ball rolling. So a lot of times, like, I'll come across something that gets me stuck in Houdini, but I'll say, you know what? I'm going to put that aside for a moment. I'm going to think about it over the weekends, and then I'll come back to it later on when I've kind of had time to think about that in the background. And in the meantime, I've gone off and done something else to be productive. So in other words, you put the problem aside, you do something else that's productive. The answer will come around eventually. And that sometimes is a better way of working if you're trying to keep your momentum and you're not trying to get stuck in a rut. So yeah, so feel free to reach out if you'd like to talk. You can always email me at tyler@cgforge.com. I'd be happy to talk with you. Again, I also do consultations and not mentorships right now, but consultations. And that could be a great thing for us to talk about in that sort of setting as well, because it really is specific to what you're trying to do. Okay, so let's move on to, let's say, one more art piece. I got maybe 4 more, but I think we might have time for about 1 or 2. And we'll take things from there. All right, this is from Billy XTZ. So Lapras use Surf, and it's super effective in Houdini Redshift. So this is Pokemon. Right on. Kind of reminds me of our favorite rubber toy Flip, except in the Pokemon version, which is awesome. So yeah, this is really cool. I think this is a fun little water simulation. One thing right away I'll say about water sims is that it makes a huge difference when you have an interesting model and you have something interesting for things to collide with. That's what gives a lot of the detail in situations like this. Now, as for constructive critique, what can improve this? Or, well, before I get to that, let's kind of talk about the concept here. For one, I like Pokemon. I think a lot of people like Pokemon. So this is fun when we see that happening. It also looks like you're able to successfully blend a flip simulation with the ocean. So that's also very cool. Also very nice. The lighting is also pretty cool. We have some highlights being caught along here that brings out a lot of the detail in water. So if you guys are ever trying to make your water feel more detailed, just bring out the highlights, take a light, kind of make it skim the surface. That brings out all of this great stuff. And so anyway, that's going really well. Few things that can improve it. It looks like your ray depth isn't going far enough. There's little black specks here, and that's due to the fact that your refraction rays aren't going through all the layers of water successfully enough. So that definitely is one thing that could be improved on a technical level. I do like the foam. I think it's very nice. And yeah, as far as the bubbles, the foam and everything, I think it's working quite well. I do think it would be maybe nice to see some bubbles or something like that along the front fins here, because the fins just feel a little bit weird, especially because we have this little bubble front here with the model, but not on the fins. So I think that that would be nice for it to kind of encompass the whole front area right there. Also, again, we have that refraction showing up dark in the front there like that. So that's definitely not ideal. And yeah, so I think that that would be an improvement in this situation. And the other thing as well is, I would say that'd probably be the main thing for now. Fix the refraction depth. Also try to make the foam along the front fins here. And I think that would feel a little bit more natural in this situation. Also, I do think it's kind of weird that we just have this little front, like little hoop around his front here. I think it feels like he's floating like separate from the flip tank. He doesn't really feel like he's part of the ocean because he has that little round chest bubble piece going on. So I think integrating that or just kind of revisiting this front area would help him feel more part of the ocean, and that would definitely improve this as well. But all in all, great job. It looks like a fun experiment, and I hope that you learned a lot along the way. It looks like I'm sure you did. Every project you do, you learn a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, this is from Michael. So Michael Schlues, and some abstract stuff. Look at this. We have a lot of grain over here, so watch out for that. We are clipping the blacks. That's controversial. Some people say, hey, clip the blacks, clip the whites. It's what happens in the real world. I somewhat agree, but I think this might be clipping a little bit too much. Usually you want to have the blacks hovering above 0 and not just like clipping to straight black. And whenever you do have these dark blacks as well, it's going to make that grain or that noise stand out a lot more too. So you have to be more light with the noise if this is a film noise when you have those black areas. But anyway, before I get ahead of myself, what is this piece? Abstract, crazy, foamy looking business. I don't know, but it's cool. It's interesting. Never seen anything like it. That's always a good thing with abstract art, right? And yeah, and I guess this might be using some VDB operations. I mean, that would be my first guess. You can kind of make that stepped approach when you blockify everything, right? And then maybe you can smooth the shapes or do something like that to get this. But all in all, I think it's really interesting and cool. I would love to see a little bit more color variation, a little bit more variation in general to break this up and to add more detail. Or if you took this whole thing and you put it with something else, this could be an awesome layer to a bigger scene of some kind. And that would also be very interesting. Like if you had some plants or some weird things growing out of there, I think that would add a lot of detail and interesting, like, I guess more things to look at. Maybe some vines going around. I don't know. But just adding something more to this, I think, would take it to that next level. And yeah, all in all, I think it's a really great experiment. It looks like these are just like daily renders, daily exercises. So that's great. Again, keep that momentum, guys. Try to get that quick projects, quick iterations through. That momentum really helps. And you can always come back to your daily experiments like this and take it further if you ever want to. So definitely a really cool idea. I think it's a great start to something and a really great example of a daily exercise that turned out to be great. So good job there, Michael. All right. Well, I think that's about it for the most part, you guys. I guess we have a couple more. Let me just go through these other two really quickly here, just to at least show you. This is by Thomas. And start this at the beginning. I thought this was really clever. Hamster wheel, battery charge. Nice fur, by the way. Arnold Hamsternator. Gets motivated, starts chugging on. What a great story. I like it. I don't know if I have really any constructive critique for this one. Well, we're a little low on time anyway, but this is really cool though. I really love the concept, love the idea. The groom is awesome. Yeah, I love this part right here. This is my favorite. When he sees the Arnold Hamsternator. Although I think it does say Schwarzenegger right there, but I really think my biggest critique is the fact that he didn't call it the Arnold Hamsternator. That would have been better for sure. But anyway, I thought this was really fun and really cool. And yeah, anyway, great job, Thomas. I think that this is awesome. And then last but not least, we have this by Chris Labno. And this is using Houdini cloth as a visual exploration. So after hair and fur, my plan is to get into vellum. So I believe we'll get into some grains, then we'll go into some cloth. I know grains and cloth may not sound like they're related at first, but trust me, when it comes to vellum, they are. And well, anyway, what I like about this is the fact that we don't just have your average looking cloth, your average looking shader. There's a bit more work put into it. We have some interesting abstract shapes going on here. And it just add a little bit of interesting shading and lighting to stuff. And man, does it make a difference, a huge difference, especially if we're talking about flowy things like cloth. I mean, this could be, something at an art exhibit. And that's just because there was more attention to the shading and lighting. It really makes a huge difference, just going that extra mile when you do that. So I thought that was really cool about this. I don't know if there's really much constructive critique for this. Again, other than the backdrop, I always hate solid color backdrops for whatever reason, especially when they're black or white. Maybe not white. I guess I just don't really like solid black backdrops. Maybe that's it. I don't know why. It just bugs me for some reason. But that's my own personal problem there. But I do think that this is overall great. Maybe some things that can help it is directing the light a little bit more. Adding a little bit more bloom along there might make this a bit more interesting. You don't want to go too crazy because you have a black backdrop and just a little bit of bloom can really make that thing fly. But I definitely think that's one thing. The other thing as well is that we have some interesting detail along here, but I do think it's getting a little too desaturated in these areas. And I think it would be better to have either more contrast or more saturation, because this just feels a little bit gray and blah to me. As my own, again, personal opinion here. It's not that bad, but I just think that this area looks really nice because there's high contrast. This area, I think, feels a little bit flat. And so trying to do something in those areas might help this out a little bit as well. But this is a great angle right here. And a really cool idea. So if you guys are doing cloth sims, vellum sims, really try to think about how you can make it interesting. And sometimes you can just make it interesting with unique shading, with unique lighting. And if you just take a little bit longer towards the end to dial those things in, it can make a huge difference. All right. Well, thank you all for joining. I always truly appreciate it. Again, next month, this is going to be at a different time. I'm going to push this back 1 hour. So again, that'll be 10 a.m. Pacific time or 1 p.m. Eastern time. If you're here in the States, I'm not sure what it would be if you're overseas, but just be on the lookout for that. Also, if you guys have anything you need, Tyler at CG Forge, you can always email me there. If you want your artwork featured on the Weekly Wrangle, you can also email me there, and I'd be happy to add you in. Until next time, I hope that you guys have a fantastic day, an excellent month of February until I see you again, and good luck with all of your Houdini projects. Take care.